Namaste and welcome to yoga today. It's so wonderful to be here and wonderful to have you here with us. So we're going to talk about Patanjali today and just focus on one of the sutras. And it's a very famous one, and it's famous because it's so full of incredibly practical and wonderful advice for anybody who is striving to move forward on the path. So I'll just start by reading the sutra itself. It's by sympathy with the happy, compassion for the sorrowful, delight in the holy, disregard of the unholy, the psychic nature moves to gracious peace. So what a wonderful plan of how to reach a state of living in gracious peace. And here he puts it so clearly and so beautifully. It's not got a lot of waffle room, fudging it. He's very clear about it. And so I thought we would just take each one and ponder, how are we doing with this particular part of this beautiful advice from the great rishis? Patanjali is the person who wrote them down, but this wisdom was being passed on throughout the Himalayas and down through India and down through China by the great rishis. So his very first one, by sympathy with the happy. How often do we do that? If you just stop and take a moment and think, how do I behave when other people are full of joy and happiness? Do I have sympathy? Which means that, can I match my feelings to their feelings? Or am I so preoccupied with what's going on in my life that I'm not able to enjoy their happiness? And there's so much behind this, that recognition that you are not stuck with your state of mind. However you're thinking and feeling, you're not stuck with that. You get to choose. And a wonderful way to choose is to align your thoughts and feelings with those of somebody who is full of joy. Just, sometimes it's just a child who's playing. Are we too busy to stop and attune with them and attune with our joy? Because what that does is it doubles their joy. When people are full of joy, yourself, if you're really happy about something, and then you spend time with people who don't appreciate that, it's possible for them to take your joy away from you. I mean, yogis would say, please don't do that, but we all have experienced it. When we're full of enthusiasm and happiness, and then somebody else comes along and we find ourselves matching their problems and their state of mind instead of us matching theirs. I mean, then matching ours so that they can experience the joy that we're experiencing. So it's such a wonderful thing to consider. It doubles their joy, because when somebody values and appreciates your joy, it magnifies it. It doubles our joy. You might not have been having a great day. We're often preoccupied with our own situation. But imagine doubling your joy and doubling somebody else's just by virtue of attuning with it. I call it sympathy, to have the same feelings as, simpatico. It's a beautiful, we very often think of sympathy as sort of almost like feeling sorry for somebody who's having a hard time. But in this instance, it's having the same feelings as somebody else. So sympathy with the happy. So let's just take a moment and just close your eyes. And just think about yourself. How do you behave? You may be able to think of an instant recently where somebody else was joyful and having a wonderful time. How did you react? Did you double their joy? Did you double yours? Or did you stay in an old habit? Joy. So it's worth considering that the next time you see somebody who's happy, who's full of joy, be attentive, notice, and attune with that. Be, be filled with joy yourself so that you can share that beautiful experience and support that. And one of the things it helps us to do is to realize we can change our consciousness. We don't have to be stuck in a rut. So, sympathy with the happy. And the next one is compassion for the sorrowful or the unhappy. Because in this way we can help halve their sorrow, lift their sorrow. And compassion, what is compassion? Compassion is this ability to feel into somebody else's emotions, but to recognize that that's their feeling, not yours. If you don't have that extra step, and then the next one, which is that you realize that you're willing to help. So you feel what they feel. You recognize that's their feeling as a result of their experience and the situation they find themselves in. So you can distinguish between their emotional state and yours. And then that knowledge that you are willing to help if you can. You don't have to. Compassion is the willingness. It may be that there's nothing you can do in this instance. In fact, very often, there's nothing that we can do. If you just have empathy, what happens is that if they're sad, you're sad. If they're hurt and angry, so are you. That's empathy. But compassion is much greater than that. So can we have compassion for the sorrowful? And this is, it's a real growing experience, becoming more and more compassionate, learning how to do this better and better, because within that is this sense of you're willing to help. That's all. You may not know what the right thing to do is. And so yogis, the Buddhists too, would want to have a really open mind and heart to knowing, is there something I can do here? You know, it's a wonderful time to say a prayer. Lord, can I be of service in some way here? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. It's enough that you can feel what somebody else is feeling, recognize it as theirs, and be willing to relieve their suffering if you can. And I heard this beautiful story that the Dalai Lama was speaking to a monk, and this monk had been imprisoned for 18 years. And when they were chatting, the monk said to the Dalai Lama, you know, he said, there were many dangerous moments when I was in prison. And so the Dalai Lama assumed that he was talking that about, you know, times when he feared for his life. But when they talked a little more, this is what this monk said. He said, yes, he said, there were times when there was the danger of losing compassion for my captors. Wow. How profound and how beautiful. You know, his life was at risk. His sacred life was at risk. Because if you lose your compassion, then you're closing yourself down from everything that is sacred in your life. So what a beautiful thing it is to live your life having compassion for those who are sorrowful and unhappy. And that recognition that when that compassion is at risk, so are you, so am I. Because we are turning away from one of the greatest gifts of spirit, compassion. And this beautiful monk, when he was released from prison, he had no signs of trauma. He didn't have PTSD for his many years in captivity. He was full of joy, pure and serene. We, in a way, yogis would say, we're in prison. We're in prison to the ego. We're in prison to life. So we too are in danger of losing our lives if we forget to have compassion for those around us. So let's take a moment and think of anyone who you know around you, a member of your family or friends, work colleagues, who suffers, who's sorrowful. Can you feel what they feel? Can you recognize it's not you, it's them? Are you aware of the desire within you to relieve suffering? And can we surrender to the soul, to the Lord of our hearts? Is there anything I can do here, Lord? Jai. So what a beautiful practice to be doing, practicing compassion for the sorrowful. And then the next part of the sutra, delight in the holy, those who are virtuous and good. So the question is, are we inspired and delighted by holy people? Does it thrill us to be in their company, to read their words, to meditate on them, rather than sticking in any sadness or pessimism that we would find in unholy things? And it's a good gauge. Do you enjoy spending time in holy company? Do you delight in it? And can you sit and delight in the company of the Lord of your heart? You know, can you sit? And even if you're in a mood, you know, Yogananda used to say, at one point he told his devotees, don't come around when you're sulking. Don't come to see me when you're in a bad mood. Come to see me when you're cheerful. And so he just said to his devotee, just don't come round. Because all you're doing is wasting that incredible opportunity, you know, to be in the company of good, wise, holy, whole people is a blessing for all of us. You know, I mean, for many, many years, when I lived in California, and life wasn't always easy. And we lived in poverty and we had lots of challenges to face. And so there were times when I would go to Sunday celebration or Sunday night class to listen to Guruji speak. And I'd show up not cheerful at all, weighed down by the daily grind, weighed down by my own karmas. And I would come into the yoga center and sit down, and Guruji would come in. And after the shortest amount of time, all those problems were gone. All of the power that they had over me disappeared. The privilege of delighting in the holy, of sitting in the company of someone who is filled with light, with love, with joy. So much so that the small ego is just filled with that same love and light. And those terrible problems that seem so insurmountable to me dissolved away. So let's take a few minutes to sense what that means for you, for me, to delight in the holy. You know, a yogi wants to be able to sit in their meditation place and delight in the holy. Let go of our habits of thought and feeling, of our fears and our anxieties and our anger and sorrow. Let them go and delight in your own soul and delight in the Lord of your heart. High. And the last one, which many people find very challenging, disregard for the unholy. People who are genuinely having a bad life. People who are really unkind and cruel. So behind this disregard, doesn't mean you don't see the soul in them. It just means this is not for you. If being in the company of somebody holy is so wonderful for us because we are able to attune with that and experience that wholeness ourselves, so it would be if you attuned to those who are unholy. We don't want that. We need some detachment. I think I said this story before that, Ramakrishna was walking along with his devotees and he said, "Oh, come cross over the road to the other side." So the devotees said, "Well, why did we move? Why did we cross the road? There didn't seem any reason." And he said, "Because the man walking towards us is a murderer. He has murdered someone. So we don't want to put ourselves next to him." Not your job. If it was your job, you would expect that you would have a direct communication from God to tell you this is your job. Because for Patanjali, for the rest of us, he's saying, disregard these people. Don't make them part of your life. It is not for you. This is not your job. So you want to have detachment. Whereas some people, there are some people who become incredibly preoccupied with people who are evil. And they start to take up their time and their effort and their life force. This is not for a devotee. We need to learn ultimately detachment. So withdraw your energy. It's absolutely wonderful to just say a prayer for that person. Just ask God's blessing on them. But it's like going back and looking at the idea of compassion. Even in compassion for the sorrowful, there's part of this detachment, which is that you need permission from your soul to help somebody else. How do you know what they need? What you do to help them might be the thing they least need. You may be telling them, "Come on, shape up, stop this, get a grip, you can do this," when what they just need to hear is, "It's okay, you're fine just the way you are." Or it could be the other way around. And so this ability to be detached, to recognize the things that we do in life, we want them to be an expression of the divine will, not an expression of the ego. And this is so vitally important when you're dealing with people who are unholy. So let's just take a minute and think of anyone in your life that you find extremely challenging. Because of their unholiness. Do you need to give them time in your mind and heart? Or can you withdraw your energy and disregard them? Cross over to the other side of the road. sky. Well, I hope that you find great depth in this beautiful sutta from Patanjali. When we're struggling, wondering how to deal with life, with the people that we encounter, it's such wisdom and such freedom comes from following this sutra. By sympathy with the happy, compassion for the sorrowful, delight in the holy, and disregard of the unholy, the psychic nature moves to gracious peace. May we experience and live in gracious peace. Namaste.